Aaliyah Clark never imagined that the proudest moment of her life would become her most humiliating. Standing on that stage in her crisp white uniform, holding the Congressional Youth Leadership Medal, she should have been basking in glory. Instead, she was fighting back tears as her parents' voices echoed across the packed auditorium. "This is so embarrassing. We didn't raise you to be a show-off." What happened next would be captured on dozens of phones and shared millions of times across social media, but not for the reasons anyone expected. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. 3 months earlier, Aaliyah Clark was just another 17-year-old senior at Roosevelt High School in Denver, Colorado. She had always been the quiet type, the kind of student who sat in the middle rows, turned in assignments on time, and never caused trouble. Her parents, Marcus and Patricia Clark, ran a small accounting firm downtown and had very specific ideas about success. Keep your head down, work hard, and don't draw attention to yourself. "Aaliyah, remember what we always say?" her mother would remind her over dinner. "Humble pie tastes better than crow. Don't go getting ideas above your station." Her father would nod in agreement, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Your mother's right. We've built everything we have by being practical, not by chasing fantasies." The Clarks weren't cruel parents, but they were cautious ones. Marcus had grown up poor in Detroit, working his way through community college while supporting his younger siblings. Patricia came from a military family where discipline and conformity were valued above individual achievement. Together, they had created a comfortable middle-class life, and they wanted nothing more than for Aaliyah to follow their safe, predictable path. But Aaliyah had always felt different. While her classmates talked about parties and dating, she found herself drawn to documentaries about social issues. She volunteered at the local homeless shelter on weekends, much to her parents' bewilderment. "It's fine to help out occasionally," Patricia would say, "but don't get too involved. Those people have problems we can't fix." Everything changed when Mrs. Rodriguez, Aaliyah's government teacher, announced the Congressional Youth Leadership Program. It was a highly competitive initiative that selected outstanding young people from across the country to work on real policy solutions for pressing social issues. Participants would spend 6 weeks in Washington, D.C., working directly with congressional staffers and policy experts. "The application process is rigorous," Mrs. Rodriguez explained to the class. "You need stellar grades, community service experience, and a compelling essay about a social issue you're passionate about. Only 50 students nationwide are chosen." Aaliyah's heart raced. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she had dreamed about. That evening at dinner, she brought up the program with carefully chosen words. "There's this government program Mrs. Rodriguez told us about," she began. "It's educational, very structured, and it would look great on college applications." Marcus looked up from his meatloaf. "What kind of program?" "It's in Washington, D.C. Students work with government officials to learn about policymaking. It's only 6 weeks during the summer." Patricia frowned. "Washington, D.C.? Aaliyah, that's across the country, and it sounds expensive." "Actually, it's fully funded. They pay for everything: travel, housing, meals. And Mom, think about how it would look on my resume. Government experience could help me get into a good business program." This wasn't entirely true. Aaliyah had no interest in business, but she knew her parents would respond to practical career benefits. After much discussion and several conditions, daily check-ins, no social media posts that might embarrass the family, and a promise to maintain her summer job at the accounting firm afterward, they reluctantly agreed to let her apply. Aaliyah threw herself into the application with an intensity that surprised even her. She wrote and rewrote her essay about homelessness in Denver, drawing on her volunteer experiences. She researched policy proposals, compiled data, and crafted arguments with the precision of a seasoned advocate. When she finally submitted the application, she felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The waiting period was agony. Aaliyah checked her email compulsively, jumping every time her phone buzzed. Her parents, meanwhile, seemed to have forgotten about the program entirely, occasionally making comments about how competitive these things were and how she shouldn't get her hopes up. 6 weeks later, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the acceptance email arrived. Aaliyah was in the school library when she saw it. Her hands shook as she opened the message. Congratulations, Aaliyah Clark. You have been selected as one of 50 participants in this year's Congressional Youth Leadership Program. She read the email 3 times before it sank in. Then she did something completely out of character. She let out a small whoop of joy, earning disapproving looks from other students. She didn't care. For the first time in her life, she had achieved something truly extraordinary. The reaction at home was more muted. Marcus examined the acceptance letter with the same scrutiny he applied to tax returns. "Well, that's nice, honey," he said finally. "Just remember, it's only a summer program. Don't let it go to your head." Patricia was more concerned with logistics. 6 weeks is a long time. What about your summer job? Mr. Henderson is counting on you to help with filing. Mom, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'm sure Mr. Henderson will understand. Opportunities come and go, Alia, but reputation lasts forever. I hope you're not planning to abandon your responsibilities for some government program. Despite their lukewarm response, Alia's excitement couldn't be dampened. Over the next few weeks, she prepared meticulously. She researched every aspect of the program, read policy papers, and even practiced formal presentation skills in her bedroom mirror. The 6 weeks in Washington, D.C. were transformative. Alia worked alongside brilliant students from across the country, engaging with complex policy issues and presenting solutions to actual congressional staffers. She discovered a passion for environmental policy and urban planning that she never knew existed. More importantly, she discovered her own voice. Her project focused on sustainable housing initiatives for low-income communities, a topic that combined her interest in homelessness with innovative urban development strategies. Her research was thorough, her presentations were compelling, and her policy recommendations were praised by program coordinators. "Alia," said Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the program director, during their final week, "your work has been exceptional. Have you considered a career in public policy? You have a real gift for this." For the first time, Alia allowed herself to imagine a different future, one that didn't involve inheriting her parents' accounting firm or pursuing the safe, predictable path they had mapped out for her. The culminating event of the program was the National Youth Policy Summit, where participants would present their projects to a panel of judges, including senators, policy experts, and military leaders. The top 3 presentations would receive special recognition, including the Congressional Youth Leadership Medal. Alia knew she had done well, but she tried not to hope for too much. The competition was fierce. Her fellow participants included a young man who had started a nonprofit organization at 15 and a girl who had already published research in academic journals. When they announced the winners, Alia's name was called second. As she walked to the stage to receive her medal from General Patricia Morrison, the youngest female general in U.S. Army history, she felt a surge of pride unlike anything she had ever experienced. This wasn't just recognition, it was validation that her ideas mattered, that her voice had value. "Miss Clark," General Morrison said as she placed the medal around Aaliyah's neck, "your sustainable housing proposal shows remarkable insight and innovation. The Army Corps of Engineers has actually requested a copy of your research. Well done." The medal ceremony was scheduled for the following weekend in Denver, giving families a chance to celebrate their children's achievements. Alia called home immediately, breathless with excitement. "Mom, Dad, I won! I got the Congressional Youth Leadership Medal. There's going to be a ceremony next Saturday, and you're invited to attend. General Morrison herself is coming to present the medals again." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Well," Marcus finally said, "I suppose that's nice. Saturday, though, that's tax season prep time." "Dad, this is huge. Only 3 people out of 50 received medals. The research I did is being requested by actual government agencies." "Aaliyah," Patricia's voice cut in, "I hope all this attention isn't going to your head. We raised you to be humble, not to go around bragging about awards." The excitement in Aaliyah's chest began to curdle into something colder. "I'm not bragging, Mom. I'm sharing good news with my parents." There's a difference between sharing and showing off, Marcus added. We'll come to the ceremony, but remember, this is just a summer program. Don't let it distract you from real life. As Aaliyah hung up the phone, she felt the familiar weight of her parents' expectations settling back on her shoulders. For 6 weeks, she had been free to dream, to excel, to imagine a bigger future. Now, walking through the corridors of the Capitol building where her medal ceremony had taken place, she wondered if she was foolish to want more than the life her parents had planned for her. She didn't know that in just 1 week, everything would change forever. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The week between Aaliyah's return to Denver and the medal ceremony passed in a strange haze of normalcy and underlying tension. Her parents had immediately put her back to work at the accounting firm, as if the past 6 weeks had been nothing more than an extended vacation. Marcus handed her a stack of client files on Monday morning with barely a mention of her achievement. "Henderson needs these organized by tax year," he said, not looking up from his computer. "And remember, no personal phone calls during work hours." Aaliyah found herself filing documents and entering data while her mind wandered to the policy discussions she had been part of just days earlier. The contrast felt surreal. 1 week, she was presenting housing solutions to congressional staffers, and now she was alphabetizing receipts for a hardware store's quarterly taxes. Patricia seemed determined to treat everything as if nothing had changed. "I'm glad you got that government thing out of your system," she said over dinner on Tuesday. "Now you can focus on your senior year and college applications. I talked to Mrs. Henderson about you possibly working part-time during the school year. It would be a good experience for business school." "Actually, Mom, I've been thinking about changing my major plans," Aaliyah ventured carefully. "The program really opened my eyes to public policy and urban planning. Maybe I could study political science or public administration instead." The reaction was swift and predictable. Marcus set down his fork with a sharp clink against his plate. "Aaliyah, we've discussed this. Political science doesn't lead to stable careers. Look at your Uncle Jerry. He got a degree in sociology and bounced from job to job for years before finally settling into insurance sales." "But Dad, General Morrison said that government agencies are looking for people with policy backgrounds. The housing research I did is actually being used." "One summer program doesn't make you an expert," Patricia interrupted. "These government people probably say nice things to all the kids. You can't build a life on compliments." Aaliyah felt the familiar frustration building in her chest, but she had learned over the years that arguing with her parents only made them dig in deeper. Instead, she retreated to her room and pulled out her laptop. Hidden in a folder labeled School Projects were the documents from her time in D.C., her research papers, presentation slides, and most importantly, the contact information for the program coordinators and fellow participants. She opened an email from Dr. Walsh that had arrived that afternoon. "Aaliyah, I wanted to follow up on our conversation about your future plans. I've been in touch with several university programs that would be excellent fits for your interests and abilities. Georgetown's Public Policy Institute has specifically asked about you after reviewing your housing proposal. Would you be interested in discussing application strategies?" For a moment, Aaliyah allowed herself to imagine walking across Georgetown's campus, diving deep into policy research, maybe even working in Washington, D.C. after graduation. Then she heard her father's voice drifting up from downstairs, discussing quarterly projections with her mother, and the dream felt impossibly distant. The medal ceremony was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the Denver Convention Center. General Morrison would be flying in specifically for the event, along with Congressman David Torres, who represented Aaliyah's district. Local media had been notified, and Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned that the school board planned to attend as well. "It's going to be quite an event," Mrs. Rodriguez had told Aaliyah during a brief meeting on Thursday. "The district is very proud of your achievement. This is exactly the kind of recognition that shows the value of our civic education programs." Aaliyah should have been excited. Instead, she found herself dreading the ceremony with increasing intensity as Saturday approached. Her parents had agreed to attend, but their attitude made it clear they viewed it as an obligation rather than a celebration. What should I wear to this thing? Patricia asked on Friday evening, rifling through her closet with obvious reluctance. I don't want to overdress, but I suppose it's some kind of formal event. The invitation said business attire, Aaliyah replied, looking over the program details for the 10th time. Marcus emerged from his home office carrying a stack of tax forms. I still think having this thing on a Saturday is inconsiderate. Some of us have real work to catch up on. Dad, it's one afternoon. The ceremony only lasts 2 hours. 2 hours we could be using productively, he muttered, disappearing back into his office. That night, Aaliyah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the Congressional Youth Leadership Medal sitting on her dresser where she had placed it after returning from D.C. In the dim light from her window, she could just make out its outline, the eagle wings spread wide, the inscription reading, Excellence in Youth Leadership across the bottom. It was beautiful, and she had earned it through months of hard work and dedication. So why did she feel like she was about to walk into a nightmare? Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Aaliyah's mood perfectly. She dressed carefully in the navy blue dress she had worn to her high school's honors banquet the year before, paired with low heels and simple jewelry. Looking in the mirror, she tried to summon the confidence she had felt during her presentations in D.C., but all she could see was the uncertainty in her own eyes. Downstairs, her parents were dressed and ready, but their body language screamed reluctance. Patricia wore a beige pantsuit that made her look like she was heading to a business meeting she'd rather skip, while Marcus had chosen a tie that was slightly too short and kept checking his watch every few minutes. Dad, it's one afternoon. The ceremony only lasts 2 hours. 2 hours we could be using productively, he muttered, disappearing back into his office. That night, Aaliyah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the Congressional Youth Leadership Medal sitting on her dresser where she had placed it after returning from D.C. In the dim light from her window, she could just make out its outline, the eagle wings spread wide, the inscription reading, Excellence in Youth Leadership across the bottom. It was beautiful, and she had earned it through months of hard work and dedication. So why did she feel like she was about to walk into a nightmare? Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Aaliyah's mood perfectly. She dressed carefully in the navy blue dress she had worn to her high school's honors banquet the year before, paired with low heels and simple jewelry. Looking in the mirror, she tried to summon the confidence she had felt during her presentations in D.C., but all she could see was the uncertainty in her own eyes. Downstairs, her parents were dressed and ready, but their body language screamed reluctance. Patricia wore a beige pantsuit that made her look like she was heading to a business meeting she'd rather skip, while Marcus had chosen a tie that was slightly too short and kept checking his watch every few minutes.
We should leave soon, Aaliyah said, picking at her breakfast. The ceremony starts at 2, but recipients are supposed to arrive by 1:30 for photos. Photos, Patricia sighed. I hope they don't expect us to smile and wave like we're at some Hollywood premiere. The drive to the convention center was largely silent, punctuated only by Marcus complaining about weekend traffic and Patricia wondering aloud why these events couldn't be held somewhere more convenient. Aaliyah sat in the back seat, watching familiar Denver neighborhoods pass by and trying to calm her increasingly nervous stomach. The convention center was already bustling with activity when they arrived. Other families were streaming in, many of them clearly excited and proud. Aaliyah spotted Jeremy Chen, one of her fellow medal recipients, posing for photos with his parents and younger sister. His family was beaming, his mother adjusting his tie, while his father took picture after picture. Look at all this fuss, Patricia muttered as they approached the registration table. You'd think these kids had cured cancer or something. Aaliyah checked in and received her program materials, including a special ribbon to wear that identified her as a medal recipient. As she pinned it to her dress, she caught sight of herself in a nearby mirror and felt a flicker of the pride she had experienced in D.C. She had accomplished something remarkable, regardless of what her parents thought. The pre-ceremony reception was held in a smaller room adjacent to the main auditorium. Tables were set up with refreshments, and easels displayed poster-sized versions of each recipient's project summary. Aaliyah found hers near the back, a detailed overview of her sustainable housing initiative, complete with architectural renderings and budget projections. Miss Clark. Dr. Walsh appeared at her elbow, smiling warmly. How wonderful to see you again. And these must be your parents? Aaliyah made the introductions, watching her parents' faces carefully. Marcus shook Dr. Walsh's hand with professional courtesy, while Patricia managed a polite smile. Your daughter's work was truly exceptional. Her housing proposal has already generated significant interest from urban planning departments in 3 different cities. She has a real future in public policy if she chooses to pursue it. That's very kind of you to say, Patricia replied with the tone she used for overly enthusiastic salespeople. Of course, Aaliyah will be focusing on more practical studies in college. We believe in keeping our feet on the ground. Dr. Walsh's smile faltered slightly, and she glanced at Aaliyah with obvious confusion. Oh, I see. Well, there are certainly many practical applications for policy work. The demand for qualified urban planners is quite strong, especially with housing shortages becoming such a critical issue. I'm sure, Marcus said dismissively, though we've found that traditional business skills tend to be more reliable in the long term. Aaliyah felt heat rising in her cheeks as Dr. Walsh's expression shifted from confusion to concern. This woman, who had seen her potential, who had encouraged her dreams, was witnessing her parents reduce her achievements to nothing more than a childhood hobby that needed to be outgrown. Excuse me, Aaliyah managed. I should go check with the ceremony coordinators. She escaped to the main auditorium, which was filling rapidly with families, school officials, and local dignitaries. The stage was set with 3 podiums and a backdrop featuring the Congressional Youth Leadership Program logo. General Morrison hadn't arrived yet, but Aaliyah could see security personnel doing final checks around the VIP seating area. Congressman Torres was already there, chatting with what appeared to be local news reporters. Aaliyah recognized the woman from Channel 7 News. Apparently, her achievement was noteworthy enough to warrant media coverage. The thought should have filled her with pride, but instead it only increased her anxiety. More people meant more witnesses to whatever was about to unfold. At exactly 1:45 p.m., a wave of hushed excitement swept through the convention center as General Patricia Morrison entered through the main doors. Even from across the crowded reception area, her presence was unmistakable. Tall, commanding, with silver hair pulled into an immaculate bun, and a chest full of ribbons and medals that spoke to decades of distinguished service. Aaliyah watched as people instinctively straightened their posture and lowered their voices. This was someone who had broken barriers, who had earned respect in one of the most challenging environments imaginable. The general moved through the crowd with practiced ease, stopping to shake hands with Congressman Torres and exchange pleasantries with the other dignitaries. She's smaller than I expected, Patricia Clark observed, adjusting her purse strap. All that fuss for someone who probably sits behind a desk all day. Marcus nodded in agreement. These military types always put on a good show, but at the end of the day, it's just politics like everything else. Aaliyah bit her tongue, remembering the extensive research she had done on General Morrison during her time in D.C. The woman had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, led disaster relief efforts after Hurricane Katrina, and had been instrumental in developing new veterans' housing programs. She was anything but a desk jockey. A program coordinator approached their small group. Mr. and Mrs. Clark, I'm Sarah Martinez, the event coordinator. We'd love to get some photos of you with Aaliyah before the ceremony begins. We have a photographer set up near the project displays. Is that really necessary? Marcus checked his watch again. We'd prefer to just sit down and get this over with. Sarah's professional smile wavered. Well, it's completely optional, but most families enjoy having these keepsake photos. It's such a special achievement. We appreciate the offer, Patricia said with finality, but we're not really photo people. Aaliyah felt something crack inside her chest. Around them, other families were eagerly posing for pictures, parents beaming with pride as they stood next to their children's project displays. Jeremy Chen's parents had taken at least 20 photos and were now showing them to anyone who would look. Actually, Aaliyah said quietly, I'd like to get some photos. Maybe just by myself? Sarah brightened immediately. Of course, let's get you positioned right here next to your housing proposal. As Aaliyah posed for solo photos, she could hear her parents behind her, talking to another couple about tax law changes and completely ignoring the significance of where they were. She managed to maintain her smile for the camera, but inside she felt increasingly isolated. At 2 p.m. sharp, the crowd began moving toward the main auditorium. The space was impressive, 1,000 seats arranged in neat rows facing a professional stage setup. Local news cameras had been positioned strategically, and Aaliyah noticed that the front 3 rows had been reserved for medal recipients and their families. "This way, please," an usher guided the Clark family toward their reserved seats. "You'll be in row 2, center section." As they settled into their chairs, Aaliyah found herself between her parents, with Jeremy Chen and his family to her left, and Maria Santos, the 3rd medal recipient, with her extended family to her right. The contrast was stark. Both neighboring families were chatting excitedly, taking selfies, and clearly savoring every moment of the experience. The ceremony began with Congressman Torres taking the podium to welcome everyone and provide context about the Congressional Youth Leadership Program. His remarks were polished and enthusiastic, emphasizing the importance of investing in young leaders and the impressive caliber of this year's participants. "These 3 young people," he said, gesturing toward the medal recipients, "represent the very best of American youth. Their projects address critical challenges facing our communities, and their innovative solutions demonstrate the kind of forward-thinking leadership our country needs." Scattered applause filled the auditorium. Aaliyah glanced sideways to see her parents sitting with their hands folded, neither clapping nor showing any visible reaction to the congressman's words. Dr. Walsh was introduced next, speaking passionately about the program's impact and the rigor of the selection process. She highlighted specific aspects of each medal recipient's work, and when she reached Aaliyah's housing initiative, her praise was particularly detailed. "Miss Clark's sustainable housing proposal doesn't just address the symptoms of urban housing shortages, it reimagines how we can create affordable, environmentally responsible communities. Her research methodology was graduate-level work, and her policy recommendations have already been shared with urban planning departments in Denver, Phoenix, and Austin." This time, the applause was more substantial, and Aaliyah felt a genuine smile cross her face for the first time all day. She had worked incredibly hard on that project, pouring countless hours into research and analysis that went far beyond what was required. "She's really laying it on thick," Patricia whispered to Marcus, just loud enough for Aaliyah to fear. "You'd think the girl had solved world hunger." The comment hit Aaliyah like a physical blow. Her smile disappeared immediately, replaced by a burning sensation in her cheeks. Around them, other families were looking at her with admiration and respect, but her own parents were treating her achievement like an embarrassing exaggeration. Finally, General Morrison was introduced to thunderous applause. She approached the podium with military precision, her speech clearly prepared but delivered with genuine warmth and conviction. "Leadership," she began, "is not about titles or positions. It's about seeing problems that others ignore and having the courage to pursue solutions that others consider impossible. These 3 young people embody that kind of leadership." She spoke for several minutes about the importance of the next generation taking ownership of society's challenges, drawing on her own experiences to illustrate how young people could make meaningful contributions to policy and governance. Her words resonated throughout the auditorium, and Aaliyah found herself hanging on every sentence. "Now," General Morrison continued, "I'd like to invite our medal recipients to join me on stage for the presentation ceremony."
Aaliyah's heart began racing as she stood and made her way to the stage steps, flanked by Jeremy and Maria. The walk felt both endless and too short. She was acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes watching her, the news cameras recording every moment, and, most painfully, her parents sitting motionless in their seats while other families cheered and applauded. The 3 recipients lined up on stage, and General Morrison approached each one individually. Jeremy was first, receiving his medal to enthusiastic cheers from his family section. Maria followed, her extended family erupting in celebration, complete with whistles and bilingual cheers. Then it was Aaliyah's turn. General Morrison stepped in front of her, holding the medal with obvious reverence. "Miss Clark," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone system, "your housing initiative represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need to address one of America's most pressing challenges. The Army Corps of Engineers has reviewed your proposal, and I can tell you that elements of your design are being seriously considered for implementation in military family housing projects." Aaliyah's eyes widened. This was news to her. Apparently, her work had reached even higher levels than she had realized. The general continued, "Young woman, you have a gift for seeing solutions where others see only problems. I hope you'll continue to pursue this path." As General Morrison placed the medal around Aaliyah's neck, the audience erupted in applause. Aaliyah looked out toward her family, hoping to see some sign of pride or acknowledgement of what the general had just revealed about her work's impact. Instead, she watched in horror as her parents remained seated, Marcus checking his phone, while Patricia looked around the auditorium with obvious impatience. But worse was coming. As the applause continued, Patricia Clark leaned over to Marcus and said something that was clearly audible to the families around them, her voice carrying in one of those unfortunate acoustic moments when background noise suddenly drops. "This is so embarrassing," she said, gesturing toward the stage. "We didn't raise her to be a show-off like this. All this attention is going to give her ideas above her station." The families nearby turned to stare. Jeremy Chen's mother looked shocked, while Maria Santos's grandmother actually gasped audibly. The comment had been loud enough that several rows had heard it, and a murmur of confused disapproval began to ripple through their section. Marcus, either oblivious to the attention they were drawing or simply not caring, responded just as audibly. "You're right, this whole thing is ridiculous, acting like she's some kind of genius when she's just a kid who did a school project." On stage, Aaliyah felt the blood drain from her face. The applause was still continuing, but she could see heads turning in the audience, people whispering and pointing toward her parents' section. The general noticed her expression change and glanced out toward the audience, trying to understand what was happening. But Patricia Clark wasn't finished. As if the previous comments hadn't been mortifying enough, she stood up partially and waved dismissively toward the stage, her voice now clearly audible throughout much of the auditorium. "Aaliyah, stop making such a spectacle of yourself. You're embarrassing us with all this drama." The effect was immediate and devastating. The applause died abruptly, replaced by stunned silence. News cameras swiveled toward the Clark family section, capturing Patricia's frustrated gestures and Marcus's obvious discomfort with the attention they were now receiving. Other parents were staring in open shock, some recording on their phones as the situation continued to unfold. General Morrison's expression shifted from confusion to something much harder. She stepped closer to her microphone, and when she spoke, her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had commanded troops in combat situations. The general's response would be captured on dozens of phones, shared millions of times across social media, and ultimately change not just Aaliyah's life, but the conversation about how parents should support their children's achievements. What happened next would go viral within hours. The silence in the auditorium stretched for what felt like an eternity. General Morrison stood motionless at the podium, her steel-gray eyes fixed on the Clark family section with an intensity that made several people in nearby rows shift uncomfortably. Aaliyah remained frozen on stage, the medal still warm against her chest, watching in horror as her parents continued to gesture dismissively. When the general finally spoke, her voice cut through the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her tone measured but carrying an unmistakable edge of controlled fury. "I have spent 32 years in the United States Army. I have served in combat zones where courage meant the difference between life and death. I have witnessed acts of heroism that would humble most civilians, and I have had the honor of recognizing extraordinary service under the most challenging circumstances." The audience was transfixed. Every phone in the auditorium seemed to be recording, capturing not just her words, but the raw emotion behind them. "But I must tell you," General Morrison continued, her voice rising slightly, "that in all my years of military service, I have never been more disgusted than I am right now."
A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Patricia Clark's hand flew to her chest as if she had been physically struck, while Marcus finally looked up from his phone, his face pale with the sudden realization that they had become the center of attention. The general stepped away from the podium, walking to the edge of the stage so she could address the Clark family directly. Her voice carried clearly through the wireless microphone clipped to her uniform. Mr. and Mrs. Clark, your daughter has just achieved something that less than 1/10 of 1% of American youth ever accomplish. She competed against thousands of applicants from across this nation. She spent 6 weeks working with congressional staffers, policy experts, and urban planners to develop solutions to problems that have stumped professionals for decades. The general's voice grew stronger, more passionate as she continued. Your daughter's housing proposal isn't just a school project, as you so dismissively called it. It's being reviewed by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The Army Corps of Engineers has requested full documentation of her research methodology. 3 major cities have asked for presentations of her findings. Aaliyah could see her parents shrinking in their seats as hundreds of faces turned toward them. Patricia had gone completely white, while Marcus appeared to be trying to make himself invisible. But perhaps most importantly, General Morrison said, her voice now carrying the full weight of her authority, your daughter represents exactly the kind of leadership this country desperately needs. She saw a problem, she researched solutions, and she had the courage to present her ideas to people who could implement them. That, Mr. and Mrs. Clark, is the definition of patriotic service. The general paused, letting her words sink in before delivering what would become the most quoted portion of her remarks. I have decorated soldiers for valor under enemy fire. I have pinned medals on young men and women who sacrificed everything for their country. And I am here to tell you that your daughter's achievement deserves the same level of respect and recognition. The fact that her own parents cannot see that is not a reflection of her worth, it's a reflection of your failure as parents to recognize the extraordinary young woman you raised. The auditorium erupted. The applause was thunderous, sustained, and tinged with an energy that went far beyond polite ceremony recognition. People were on their feet, cheering not just for Aaliyah, but for the general's defense of her. Jeremy Chen's family was applauding wildly, his mother wiping tears from her eyes. Maria Santos's grandmother was shouting, "See, see," while pumping her fist in the air. But General Morrison wasn't finished. Miss Clark, she said, turning back toward Aaliyah, who was now openly crying on stage. I want you to look out at this audience. These people understand what you've accomplished. These people recognize your potential. And when your own family fails to support your dreams, I want you to remember that there is an entire community of people who believe in you. The general walked over to Aaliyah and placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Young lady, I am personally going to ensure that every university policy program in this country knows about your work. I am going to make certain that the doors you want to walk through are not just open, but welcoming. Your parents may not understand what you've achieved, but I do, and I will make sure the right people know about it. The crowd was going wild now. The standing ovation had continued for nearly 2 minutes, with people cheering, whistling, and shouting encouragement. News cameras were capturing every moment, and Aaliyah could see reporters frantically typing on their phones and tablets. In the midst of the celebration, she caught sight of her parents. Patricia was crying, not tears of pride, but tears of humiliation and anger. Marcus was staring at his shoes, his face red with embarrassment, as people around them continued to clap and cheer. Several families near them had moved away, leaving empty seats that made their isolation even more obvious. Dr. Walsh had joined them on stage, along with Congressman Torres, both looking stunned by what they had just witnessed. The congressman approached his microphone with obvious uncertainty. I think we can all agree that General Morrison has given us something to think about. The courage to pursue excellence and the importance of supporting our young leaders, even when, especially when, their dreams challenge our own expectations.
As the formal ceremony concluded, the auditorium transformed into organized chaos. Reporters immediately swarmed toward the stage, eager to interview both General Morrison and Aaliyah. Families crowded forward, many of them wanting to congratulate Aaliyah personally or simply to shake the general's hand. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at Aaliyah's side, her face flushed with excitement and concern. "Aaliyah, honey, are you okay? That was incredible. General Morrison's response was absolutely remarkable." Aaliyah wiped her eyes, still processing what had just happened. "I can't believe she said all that. I mean, I'm grateful, but now everyone's going to be talking about my family, about how my parents—" "No," Mrs. Rodriguez interrupted firmly. "Everyone is going to be talking about how an extraordinary young woman received the recognition and support she deserved, even if it didn't come from where she expected it."
A reporter from Channel 7 News approached them. "Miss Clark, I'm Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7. Would you be willing to do a brief interview about what just happened? General Morrison's remarks were quite remarkable, and I think our viewers would love to hear your perspective." Before Aaliyah could respond, she spotted her parents making their way through the crowd toward the exit. Patricia was walking quickly, her purse clutched tightly against her chest, while Marcus followed behind, his face set in grim lines. They weren't coming to find her, they were leaving. The realization hit her like a physical blow. After everything that had just happened, after General Morrison's incredible defense of her achievements, after the overwhelming support from hundreds of strangers, her own parents were walking away without a word. "Miss Clark?" the reporter prompted gently. "Are you all right?" Aaliyah straightened her shoulders, feeling something shift inside her chest. For the first time in her life, she had witnessed what unconditional support looked like. General Morrison, a woman who barely knew her, had defended her more passionately than her own parents ever had. Dr. Walsh had seen her potential and worked to nurture it. Even strangers in the audience cheered for her success. "Yes," she said, turning to face the camera with new determination. "Yes, I'd be happy to do an interview." As the reporter set up her equipment, General Morrison approached Aaliyah one final time. "Miss Clark, I meant every word I said up there. Here's my personal card. When you're ready to apply to colleges, when you're ready to pursue internships, when you need recommendations or connections, you call me. Don't let anyone, including your family, convince you to settle for less than your potential." Aaliyah took the card with shaking hands. "General Morrison, I don't know how to thank you. What you did up there, no one has ever stood up for me like that." "That's exactly why I did it," the general replied. "Every young person deserves to have someone believe in them completely. If your parents can't do it, then it falls to the rest of us to fill that gap. You're going to do amazing things, Aaliyah. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." As the general walked away, surrounded by admirers and reporters, Aaliyah realized that while she had lost something today, perhaps the relationship with her parents would never recover from this public humiliation. She had gained something even more valuable. She had discovered her own worth, reflected in the eyes of people who mattered. She had learned that support could come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. The interview with Channel 7 lasted 20 minutes, followed by conversations with reporters from 3 other local stations and 2 Denver newspapers. By the time Aaliyah finally made it to the parking lot, her parents were long gone. Mrs. Rodriguez offered to drive her home, but Aaliyah realized she wasn't ready to face whatever waited for her there. Instead, she spent the evening at Jeremy Chen's house, where his family welcomed her with the kind of enthusiasm and celebration she had hoped to experience with her own parents. They wanted to hear every detail about her project, her time in Washington, D.C., and her future plans. For the first time in weeks, Aaliyah felt like her achievements were not just acknowledged, but celebrated. Meanwhile, across Denver and soon across the country, videos of General Morrison's speech were being uploaded, shared, and viewed millions of times. The story of the parents who embarrassed their daughter at her medal ceremony and the general who defended her was spreading far beyond anything Aaliyah could have imagined. Her life was about to change in ways she never could have predicted. Aaliyah woke up Sunday morning to 847 missed calls, 2,341 text messages, and a Gmail inbox so full it had stopped loading. She stared at her phone in bewilderment, wondering if there had been some kind of technical malfunction. Then she opened the first video link Jeremy's sister had sent her at 6:23 a.m. The footage was shaky, clearly recorded on someone's phone from the audience, but the audio was crystal clear. She watched herself standing on stage while General Morrison's voice rang out, "I have never been more disgusted than I am right now." The video had been posted on TikTok 18 hours earlier and already had 3.2 million views. Her hands trembling, Aaliyah scrolled through the comments. Thousands of people were defending her, sharing their own stories of unsupportive parents and praising General Morrison's intervention. But mixed in were comments about her family, speculations about her home life, and debates about whether the general had overstepped her boundaries. The Chen family had graciously let her stay the night, understanding that she wasn't ready to face whatever chaos awaited her at home. But now, sitting in Jeremy's guest bedroom at 8 a.m. on Sunday morning, she realized she had no choice but to deal with the aftermath. Her first call was from Mrs. Rodriguez, who sounded both excited and concerned. "Aaliyah, honey, I've been fielding calls since 6 a.m. Good Morning America wants to interview you. The Today Show has called twice. CNN reached out to the school district office. This thing has exploded beyond anything anyone expected." "Mrs. Rodriguez, I don't understand. How did it spread so fast?" Multiple people recorded General Morrison's speech, and every single video went viral overnight. The main TikTok has over 5 million views now. It's been shared on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. People are calling it the most powerful defense of a young person they've ever seen.
Aaliyah felt overwhelmed. What am I supposed to do? I never wanted this kind of attention. Right now, you need to get home and deal with your family situation. But Aaliyah, I want you to know, the school district is behind you 100%. Whatever you need, whatever support you require, we're here. The drive home in Jeremy's mom's car was surreal. Aaliyah kept expecting to see news vans or reporters, but her suburban Denver neighborhood looked exactly the same as always. It wasn't until they turned onto her street that she saw the problem. 7 cars were parked outside the Clark house, including 2 with news station logos. A small crowd of reporters and cameramen stood on the sidewalk, some talking into microphones, others clearly waiting for someone to emerge from the house. "Oh no," Mrs. Chen murmured from the driver's seat. "Aaliyah, maybe you should come back to our house for a while longer." But Aaliyah shook her head. "I need to face this. I need to talk to my parents." Mrs. Chen drove past the media crowd and dropped her off at the back entrance through the alley. Aaliyah slipped through the gate and entered through the kitchen door, hoping to avoid the chaos out front. The house was eerily quiet. She found her parents in the living room, curtains drawn, both looking like they hadn't slept all night. Marcus was hunched over his laptop, while Patricia sat rigidly in her chair, staring at a muted television showing what appeared to be news coverage. "Aaliyah," her father's voice was flat, exhausted. "You need to see this." He turned his laptop screen toward her. It was showing the local news website, with her story as the top headline. "Denver teen defended by general after parents' public humiliation." Below that was a smaller headline, "Local accounting firm under fire after viral video." "Dad, what do you mean under fire?" Patricia finally looked at her, and Aaliyah was shocked by what she saw. Her mother's eyes were red and swollen, her usually perfect hair disheveled, and she looked older than Aaliyah had ever seen her. "Our business phone has been ringing non-stop since midnight," Patricia said, her voice hoarse. "People calling to tell us what terrible parents we are. Someone posted our home address online. We've gotten over 300 negative Google reviews since last night. 3 clients have already called to say they're taking their business elsewhere." Marcus closed the laptop with a sharp snap. "Aaliyah, what were you thinking? Did you know those people were recording? Did you plan for this to happen?" "Plan for this?" Aaliyah stared at him in disbelief. "Dad, I plan to receive an award and hopefully have my parents be proud of me. I didn't plan for you to humiliate me in front of hundreds of people." We were not trying to humiliate you, Patricia said, standing up abruptly. We were trying to keep you grounded, to prevent you from getting ideas above your station. And now look what's happened. Our lives are being destroyed because of your need for attention. Something inside Aaliyah snapped. For 17 years, she had swallowed her disappointment, accepted their limitations, tried to be the daughter they wanted instead of the person she was meant to be. But after experiencing General Morrison's unwavering support, after seeing what unconditional encouragement looked like, she couldn't go back to accepting less. My need for attention, she said, her voice rising. Mom, I won a national competition. I created policy solutions that are being implemented by real government agencies. And instead of celebrating that, you stood up in front of everyone and called me a show-off and an embarrassment. Because that's what you were being, Patricia shot back, standing up there like you're some kind of genius, accepting all that praise like you deserve it. I do deserve it, Aaliyah shouted, surprising herself with her own vehemence. I worked harder on that project than I've ever worked on anything in my life. I spent 6 weeks learning from experts, developing real solutions to real problems, and yes, I am proud of that. I should be proud of that. Marcus stood up, his face flushed. Aaliyah, that's enough. You're 17 years old. You did a school project. That doesn't make you qualified to redesign American housing policy. Actually, it does make me qualified to contribute ideas, she replied, feeling stronger with each word. That's what the Congressional Youth Leadership Program is for, to identify young people who can think beyond conventional solutions. That's what General Morrison was trying to tell you yesterday, if you had bothered to listen instead of checking your phone. The doorbell rang, followed by persistent knocking. A voice called out, Mr. and Mrs. Clark, this is Rebecca Martinez from Channel 9 News. We'd like to get your side of the story. Patricia sank back into her chair, putting her head in her hands. This is a nightmare. Our reputation, our business, everything we've built, it's all being destroyed because of 5 minutes of viral video.
Aaliyah looked at her parents, really looked at them, and realized something that should have been obvious years earlier. They weren't just unsupportive, they were fundamentally incapable of seeing beyond their own limitations. They had created a small, safe world for themselves, and they were terrified of anything that threatened to expand those boundaries. Mom, Dad, she said quietly, your reputation isn't being destroyed because of what happened yesterday. It's being destroyed because thousands of people watched you publicly shame your own daughter for achieving something extraordinary. The problem isn't the video going viral. The problem is what you chose to do while those cameras were recording. Her phone buzzed with another call. This time it was Dr. Walsh. Aaliyah, Dr. Walsh's voice was excited and urgent. I've been trying to reach you all morning. Georgetown University called me at 7 a.m. They want to offer you early admission to their public policy program, full scholarship, based on your housing project and what happened yesterday. Harvard's Kennedy School has also reached out, along with Columbia and UC Berkeley. This viral moment has opened doors that normally take years to access. Aaliyah felt her world shift on its axis. Dr. Walsh, that's incredible. But what about my parents? They want me to study business, to work in their firm. Aaliyah, after yesterday, I think it's clear that your parents' plan for your future might not align with your potential. General Morrison wasn't just defending you. She was recognizing something about your capabilities that goes far beyond family expectations. As Dr. Walsh continued to describe the opportunities flooding in, Aaliyah watched her parents through the kitchen doorway. Marcus was on his laptop again, probably reading more negative coverage. Patricia was answering the house phone, her voice strained as she tried to handle what was clearly another angry caller. They were dealing with the consequences of their actions, but they still didn't seem to understand what those actions had revealed about their character. They were focused on managing the damage to their reputation rather than reflecting on why their behavior had caused such widespread outrage. Dr. Walsh, Aaliyah said, stepping outside onto the back patio for privacy, can you send me information about all of those programs? I think it's time I started making my own decisions about my future. Of course. And Aaliyah, I want you to know that what General Morrison said yesterday about having a community of people who believe in you, that's absolutely true.
you're not alone in this." As she hung up the phone, Aaliyah realized that the viral video hadn't just exposed her parents' inability to support her dreams, it had connected her with people who could. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from feeling isolated and dismissed to having some of the country's top universities competing for her attention.
The media circus outside would eventually die down. Her parents would probably rebuild their business and find a way to blame her for the temporary disruption. But for Aaliyah, there was no going back. She had seen what her life could look like with the right support, and she was determined to pursue that path regardless of whether her family chose to join her journey. The doorbell rang again, but this time Aaliyah didn't feel the familiar anxiety that had defined her relationship with attention and achievement. Instead, she felt something she had never experienced before, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth, regardless of who chooses to recognize it. 3 weeks after the ceremony, Aaliyah found herself sitting in the office of Roosevelt High School's guidance counselor, surrounded by acceptance packets from universities she had only dreamed of attending. The manila envelopes covered the entire conference table: Georgetown, Harvard, Columbia, Stanford, UC Berkeley, Northwestern, and half a dozen others, each containing full scholarship offers and personal letters from department heads who had seen her viral moment and wanted her in their programs. "I've been a guidance counselor for 23 years, Mrs. Patricia said, shaking her head in amazement, "and I've never seen anything like this. Usually, students spend months begging for admission to these schools. They're competing to recruit you." Aaliyah picked up the Georgetown packet, running her fingers over the university seal embossed on the folder. Inside was a personal letter from Dr. Elizabeth Harper, director of the Public Policy Institute, that began, "Dear Miss Clark, General Morrison's defense of your achievements went viral for good reason. Your housing proposal represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking we hope to cultivate at Georgetown." The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, her parents had insisted that success meant keeping your head down, avoiding attention, and following predictable paths. Now, the very attention they had tried to prevent was opening doors they never could have imagined. "Have you talked to your parents about any of these offers?" Mrs. Patricia asked gently. Aaliyah's expression tightened. The past 3 weeks at home had been a study in stubborn silence. Marcus and Patricia Clark had retreated into damage control mode, spending their days managing the fallout from their business's plummeting online reviews and their evenings pretending the media attention had never happened. They spoke to Aaliyah only when necessary and never about her future plans. "They're still insisting I apply to Colorado State for business," Aaliyah said. "Yesterday, my mom left a brochure for their accounting program on my desk. She hasn't mentioned a single one of these university offers."
"And how does that make you feel?" Aaliyah was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at students walking across the campus courtyard. "It makes me realize that some people will never see your potential, no matter how clearly it's demonstrated. But it also makes me understand that I can't live my life waiting for them to change." Her phone buzzed with a text from General Morrison. Over the past 3 weeks, the general had become an unexpected mentor, checking in regularly and providing guidance on everything from university selection to handling media requests. The message was brief. "Coffee this afternoon? I have news about your housing proposal." An hour later, Aaliyah sat across from General Morrison in a small cafe near downtown Denver, watching the woman who had transformed her life with a single speech casually order a black coffee and a blueberry muffin. "You look tired," the general observed, studying Aaliyah's face with the same intensity she had used to address the auditorium 3 weeks earlier. "It's been complicated at home," Aaliyah admitted. "My parents are acting like none of this happened. They're still planning my life as if I'm going to inherit their accounting practice and live within 20 miles of where I was born." General Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "I've seen this before, unfortunately. Some parents create such rigid expectations for their children that they can't adjust when those children exceed those limitations. They view their child's extraordinary achievements as a threat to their own worldview. But I don't understand how they can ignore evidence that's right in front of them. Universities that wouldn't normally look at a high school student are competing for my attention.
Government agencies are implementing ideas I developed. How do they just pretend that doesn't matter? Because acknowledging it would mean admitting they were wrong about your potential, the general replied. And for some people, being wrong is more frightening than missing opportunities. She leaned forward, her voice taking on the same commanding tone that had captivated the auditorium. Aaliyah, I brought you here because I have news that's going to make your decision even more complicated. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has approved a pilot program based on your sustainable housing research. They want to implement your design concepts in 3 cities over the next 2 years. Aaliyah's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. They want to actually build my housing designs? More than that, they want you to be part of the implementation team. It would mean working with federal agencies, urban planners, and construction firms to turn your research into actual communities where real families will live. It's the kind of opportunity that usually goes to graduate students with years of experience. The weight of the moment settled over Aaliyah like a blanket. This wasn't just about college admissions or career paths anymore. This was about having a real impact on people's lives, about seeing her ideas become solutions for families struggling with housing insecurity. What would that mean practically? She asked. It would mean accepting Georgetown's offer and structuring your undergraduate program to include practical experience with the HUD pilot program. You'd spend summers in Washington working directly with federal agencies. By the time you graduate, you'd have experience that typically takes a decade to accumulate. Aaliyah felt a mixture of excitement and terror. This was everything she had dreamed of and more, but it would also mean completely abandoning her parents' vision for her life. General Morrison, what if I'm not ready for all this? What if I'm just a 17-year-old from Denver who got lucky with one good project? The general's expression softened, but her voice remained firm. Aaliyah, I've spent my career identifying potential in young people. I've seen talent in combat zones, in disaster relief efforts, in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. What you have isn't luck. It's a combination of analytical ability, creative problem-solving, and moral conviction that's extremely rare. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But more importantly, you have something that can't be taught: the courage to pursue solutions even when the people closest to you don't understand or support your vision. That courage is what will make you successful, regardless of which path you choose. That evening, Aaliyah returned home to find her parents in the living room, reviewing financial documents for their business. The past 3 weeks had taken their toll. Several more clients had left, and they were clearly struggling to rebuild their reputation. "Mom, Dad," she said, settling into the chair across from them, "I need to talk to you about college." Marcus looked up from his calculator. "Good. I've been meaning to discuss your Colorado State application. The deadline is approaching, and we need to make sure you're focusing on practical options rather than getting distracted by all this media nonsense." "Dad, I'm not applying to College State." The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. Patricia set down her pen and looked at Aaliyah with an expression of barely controlled frustration.
Aaliyah, we've discussed this. These fancy universities that are suddenly interested, they're just capitalizing on a viral moment. In 6 months, no one will remember what happened, and you'll be stuck in a program that doesn't lead to stable employment. Mom, Georgetown University wants me to be part of a federal housing program. They're going to implement my research in 3 cities. This isn't about viral fame. This is about having ideas that can actually help people. Marcus slammed his hand on the coffee table, sending papers scattering. Enough! You're 17 years old. You don't get to make decisions that will ruin your entire future because some general gave a pretty speech. Ruin my future? Aaliyah stood up, feeling the same surge of confidence she had experienced during her confrontation 3 weeks earlier. Dad, accepting a full scholarship to Georgetown University isn't ruining my future. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. It's the opportunity to waste 4 years studying something that won't pay the bills, Patricia said coldly. We've built a successful business. We're offering you a clear path to financial security. And you want to throw that away to chase some fantasy about changing the world? Aaliyah looked at her parents, really looked at them,
and realized that no amount of external validation would ever be enough to change their perspective. They had made their decision about who she was and what she was capable of years ago, and they weren't interested in updating that assessment based on evidence. "I'm accepting Georgetown's offer," she said quietly. "I'm going to be part of the HUD pilot program, and I'm going to study public policy. This isn't a discussion. It's me telling you what I've decided." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Patricia began crying, not tears of sadness, but tears of anger and frustration. Marcus stood up, his face red with rage. "If you do this," he said, his voice shaking, "don't expect us to support you. Don't expect us to pay for anything, to help with anything, or to welcome you back when this fantasy falls apart." "I'm not expecting you to support me," Aaliyah replied, surprising herself with her own calm. "I haven't expected that for a long time. But I'm also not going to spend the rest of my life making myself smaller so you can feel more comfortable." She walked toward the stairs, then turned back to face them one last time.
I love you both, but I'm done trying to earn approval from people who are determined not to give it. Georgetown believes in me. General Morrison believes in me. The federal government believes in my ideas enough to fund them. That's going to have to be enough. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Aaliyah heard her mother's voice, choking with emotion. "She's throwing her life away. After everything we've done for her, she's throwing it all away." But for the first time in her life, Aaliyah knew they were wrong. She wasn't throwing anything away. She was finally picking up everything she was meant to carry. 2 years later, Aaliyah stood in the Rose Garden of the White House, wearing a navy blue blazer and holding a folder containing the preliminary results from the HUD Sustainable Housing Pilot Program. At 19, she was the youngest policy advisor ever invited to brief the president's housing task force, and the culmination of everything that had started with her parents' public humiliation was about to reach its most extraordinary conclusion.
"Miss Clark," said Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Maria Gonzalez, approaching with a warm smile, "are you ready for this? The president is particularly interested in the Phoenix Project results." Aaliyah nodded, feeling a calm confidence that would have been unimaginable during her high school years. The past 2 years at Georgetown had transformed her from a bright teenager with good ideas into a skilled policy analyst with real-world experience in federal program implementation. The housing pilot program had exceeded every projection. The 3 communities built using Aaliyah's sustainable design principles in Denver, Phoenix, and Atlanta had not only provided affordable housing for over 800 families, but had also reduced energy costs by 40% and created local jobs in green construction technologies. Most importantly, the communities had waiting lists of families desperate to live in the affordable, environmentally responsible housing that Aaliyah had envisioned as a 17-year-old. "The numbers speak for themselves," Aaliyah said, checking her notes one final time. "But what matters most is that we proved affordable housing doesn't have to mean substandard housing. These communities are places where families actually want to live, where children can thrive, and where residents take pride in their homes." As they walked toward the Oval Office, Aaliyah couldn't help but think about the chain of events that had led her here. The viral video of General Morrison defending her had now been viewed over 50 million times across all platforms, spawning countless discussions about parental support, recognizing potential in young people, and the importance of encouraging rather than limiting children's dreams. General Morrison, now retired and serving as a senior advisor to several educational foundations, had become not just a mentor, but a surrogate family member. She had attended Aaliyah's Georgetown graduation ceremony the previous month, sitting in the section reserved for family, while Marcus and Patricia Clark remained notably absent. The relationship with her parents had never recovered. They had followed through on their threat to cut off financial support, and communication had dwindled to obligatory holiday cards and brief, awkward phone calls. Their accounting business had eventually stabilized, though it never fully recovered from the reputational damage.
More painfully, they had never acknowledged Aaliyah's subsequent achievements, treating her national recognition as if it were an embarrassing phase she had never outgrown. "Miss Clark?" Secretary Gonzalez's voice brought her back to the present. "We're here." The Oval Office was smaller than she had expected, but the weight of history was unmistakable. President Jennifer Walsh, who had no relation to Dr. Walsh from the Congressional Youth Leadership Program, despite the shared surname, stood behind her desk reviewing documents. "Mr. President," Secretary Gonzalez announced, "this is Aaliyah Clark, the principal architect of our Sustainable Housing Initiative." President Walsh looked up, and Aaliyah was struck by the genuine interest in her expression. "Miss Clark, I've been following your work since that remarkable video went viral 2 years ago. General Morrison spoke very highly of you during our veterans housing discussion last month." "Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to be here." "The honor is mine. Your housing pilot program has generated more positive press for HUD than we've seen in a decade. But more importantly, it's actually solving problems for American families. Tell me about the results." For the next 30 minutes, Aaliyah presented her findings with the poise and expertise of someone twice her age. She discussed cost savings, environmental impact, community satisfaction scores, and long-term sustainability projections. The president asked detailed questions, clearly having done his homework on the program's specifics. "Miss Clark," he said finally, "Secretary Gonzalez has recommended expanding this program to 12 additional cities over the next 3 years. I'm inclined to agree. Are you prepared to lead that expansion?" Aaliyah felt a moment of surreal disbelief. She was being asked to oversee a national housing initiative that could impact thousands of families across the country. "Mr. President, I'm honored by your confidence, but I should mention that I'm still finishing my undergraduate degree. I have one more semester at Georgetown." President Walsh smiled. "Miss Clark, you've already accomplished more in the field of housing policy than most career professionals. Age and academic status matter far less than results, and your results speak volumes. Besides," he added with a slight grin, "I suspect General Morrison would never forgive me if I didn't give you this opportunity." As they concluded the meeting and walked back through the White House corridors, Secretary Gonzalez pulled Aaliyah aside. "I want you to understand what just happened there," she said. "The president doesn't typically spend 30 minutes with undergraduate students. He certainly doesn't offer them leadership roles in major federal initiatives. You've earned this through the quality of your work and the impact of your ideas." "Secretary Gonzalez, I have to ask, do you think my age will be a problem? Leading a team of career professionals when I'm barely 20? "Aaliyah, I've watched you work for 2 years. I've seen how you interact with construction managers who have 40 years of experience, how you present to city councils, how you handle media interviews about complex policy issues. Your age stopped being relevant the moment you proved you could deliver results." That evening, Aaliyah sat in her Georgetown dorm room, video calling Jeremy Chen, who was now studying engineering at MIT. They had remained close friends, bonded by their shared experience of the viral ceremony and their subsequent journeys to prestigious universities. "So, let me get this straight," Jeremy said, grinning at the camera. "You just got asked by the President of the United States to run a national housing program, and you're worried about whether you're qualified?" "It feels overwhelming," Aaliyah admitted. 2 years ago, I was filing tax returns in my parents' office. Now I'm being asked to oversee projects that will affect thousands of families. What if I mess it up?" "Aaliyah, remember what General Morrison said at the ceremony. You have the courage to pursue solutions even when people don't understand or support your vision. That hasn't changed. If anything, you've proven it over and over again." Jeremy's expression grew more serious. "Have you thought about reaching out to your parents? Letting them know about today?" Aaliyah was quiet for a moment. She had thought about it during the drive back from the White House. Part of her still hoped that eventually her parents would realize what they had missed, what they had chosen to reject. "I actually did send them a text," she said finally. "I told them about the White House meeting and the national program expansion." "And?" My mom texted back, "That's nice, dear. Dad and I are busy with tax season preparations. Nothing else. Jeremy shook his head in disbelief. I will never understand how they can ignore something like this. You briefed the President of the United States today, and they responded like you told them you got a part-time job at a coffee shop.
I think I finally understand something, Aaliyah said. They're not ignoring my achievements because they don't see them. They're ignoring them because accepting them would mean admitting that their entire worldview was wrong. It would mean acknowledging that the safe, small life they planned for me was actually the limitation, not the protection they thought it was. She paused, looking out her window at the Georgetown campus where she had found her intellectual home. For a long time, I kept hoping they would come around, that eventually they'd be proud of me. But I realize now that I can't live my life waiting for approval from people who are fundamentally unable to give it. So, what happens now? Jeremy asked. Now I finish my degree, take the job the president offered me, and continue building the life I was meant to live. I have people who believe in me: General Morrison, Secretary Gonzalez, Dr. Harper, even the president. That's more support than most people ever get. 3 months later, Aaliyah Clark graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown University with a degree in public policy and a job offer that would make her the youngest senior policy advisor in HUD history. General Morrison sat in the front row at graduation, beaming with pride as Aaliyah crossed the stage. That evening, at the graduation reception, a reporter from the Washington Post approached her for an interview about her remarkable journey from viral video subject to White House policy advisor. Miss Clark, the reporter asked, looking back on that ceremony 2 years ago, when your parents publicly dismissed your achievements, do you have any regrets about how things unfolded? Aaliyah considered the question carefully. Around her, families were celebrating their graduates, proud parents taking endless photos and sharing their children's accomplishments with anyone who would listen. She thought about Marcus and Patricia Clark, probably at home in Denver, preparing for another ordinary weekend, having missed entirely the extraordinary life their daughter was building. I regret that my parents weren't able to see my potential, she said finally. I regret that they missed the opportunity to be part of this journey. But I don't regret standing on that stage, accepting that medal, or pursuing the path that felt right to me. She paused, watching General Morrison talking animatedly with Dr. Harper about Aaliyah's future plans. Sometimes the family that believes in you isn't the family you're born into, she continued. Sometimes it's the family you choose, the mentors who see your potential, and the community that forms around your dreams. I've been incredibly blessed to find that kind of family. The reporter scribbled notes, then looked up one more time. Any advice for young people whose families don't support their ambitions? Aaliyah smiled, thinking of all the messages she had received over the past 2 years from teenagers facing similar struggles with unsupportive parents. Believe in yourself, even when the people closest to you don't, she said. Your worth isn't determined by whether your family recognizes it. Sometimes the greatest act of love you can show yourself is refusing to make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's limited vision of who you should be. As the reception wound down and Aaliyah prepared for the next chapter of her life, she realized that the viral video that had once seemed like her most humiliating moment had actually been her liberation. It had freed her from the exhausting pursuit of approval that would never come. It had connected her with people who could see and nurture her potential. The girl who had stood on that stage 2 years ago, fighting back tears as her parents dismissed her achievements, was gone. In her place stood a young woman who knew her own worth, who had the support of people who mattered, and who was ready to spend her life turning impossible dreams into practical solutions that could change the world. And somewhere in Denver, Marcus and Patricia Clark continued to run their small accounting firm, never knowing that their daughter was about to implement housing policies that would be studied in universities for decades to come, never understanding that the child they had tried so hard to keep grounded was now soaring higher than they had ever thought possible to imagine. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.